The digital clock on the hotel nightstand read 11:30 at night when my laptop chimed with an incoming video call. My heart lifted as my husband's name, Andrew, appeared on the screen. 3 days away from home on this business trip felt like an eternity, and his face was exactly what I needed to see before sleep. I smoothed my long brown hair, adjusted the emerald earrings he had given me for our last anniversary, and clicked to accept the call. "Hey, you." Andrew's voice came through, warm and familiar. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his fingers through it, a habit I'd found endearing since we first met 10 years ago. "How's the Chicago conference going?" I leaned against the hotel pillows, cradling my laptop. "Exhausting, but good. I closed the Henderson account today. They're going with our full marketing package for next quarter." "That's my girl." Andrew smiled, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. I noticed he was wearing the navy sweater I bought him last Christmas, the one Patricia, his mother, had helped me pick out during our traditional holiday shopping trip. "How are your parents?" I asked, shifting the conversation. "Did they enjoy the dinner at that new Italian place?" Andrew's expression flickered, almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, they loved it. Mom couldn't stop talking about the tiramisu." He glanced away from the camera for a moment. "She asked about you?" "Of course. You know how she is. Always checking to make sure I'm treating her favorite daughter-in-law right." I smiled, genuine warmth spreading through my chest. Patricia and Richard had welcomed me into their family with open arms from the very beginning. Unlike my own parents, who lived across the country and could barely be bothered to call on holidays, the Whitmans had given me the family connection I'd always craved. Sunday dinners, impromptu weeknight calls, Patricia's tendency to drop by with homemade soup when either of us caught so much as a sniffle. They were the parents I'd always wished for. "Tell them I miss them," I said. "Maybe we can do brunch this weekend when I get back." "Sure. They'd love that," Andrew replied, then suddenly glanced at something off-screen. "Hold on a sec," he said, standing up quickly. The laptop camera showed the ceiling of our bedroom for a moment before he adjusted it back down. "Sorry about that. Thought I heard something downstairs." But in that brief moment, when the camera angle shifted, something caught my eye. There, on my side of our king-size bed, the left side, where I always slept, was a splash of bright red against the white sheets. It was small, rectangular. A phone. A bright red phone that definitely wasn't mine. Ice crystallized in my veins, but my face betrayed nothing. 8 years of marriage had taught me many things about Andrew, and one of them was that confrontation made him defensive and evasive. Whatever was happening, I wouldn't learn the truth through accusations thrown across 300 miles. "Everything okay down there?" I asked, my voice impressively steady. Andrew sat back down, running a hand through his hair again. "Yeah, all good. Probably just the neighbor's cat. That thing is always knocking over the trash cans." We didn't have trash cans outside. We used a dumpster in the alley behind our townhouse. But I just nodded. "So, when are you coming home again?" Andrew asked, his voice casual, but with an undertone I couldn't quite place. Eagerness? Anxiety? "Thursday afternoon." I lied smoothly. My actual return ticket was for Thursday morning, but something told me that information was now a strategic advantage. "The closing session runs until 3. Then I'll head to the airport." "Great. I'll pick you up. Text me your flight details." "Actually," I said, thinking quickly, "don't worry about it. I might grab dinner with some colleagues first, so I'll just take a cab home." After another 10 minutes of mundane conversation that I barely registered, we said our goodnights. When the call ended, I sat motionless, staring at the blank screen while my mind raced. A red phone on my side of the bed. Andrew suddenly standing to adjust the camera, the strange edge to his voice. My laptop screen dimmed from inactivity, and in the darkened reflection, I saw my own face. Composed. Calculating. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to the airline's website. Within minutes, I had changed my flight to the earliest available departure the next morning, 6:15 a.m. I'd be home before noon. Next, I picked up my phone and scrolled to Patricia's number. I hesitated only briefly before pressing call. Checking the time. Not quite midnight. Patricia and Richard were night owls. They'd still be up. "Vivian. Sweetheart. Is everything okay?" Patricia's warm voice answered, concern evident even through the phone lines. "Everything's fine, Patricia," I assured her, forcing brightness into my tone. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. Richard and I were just watching that detective show you recommended. You know how we love our mysteries. I took a deep breath. I wanted to surprise Andrew tomorrow. My conference wrapped up early, so I'm catching a morning flight home. I was hoping maybe you and Richard might want to join me for a surprise lunch at our place. Say, around 1 o'clock? There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by muffled conversation. Patricia, relaying the invitation to Richard. We'd love to. Patricia finally replied, excitement bubbling in her voice. Richard has a doctor's appointment at 11:30, but we should be done by 12:30 at the latest. Oh, this will be wonderful. Andrew's been a bit down lately. Said he's been missing you. This will cheer him right up. Down lately. My grip tightened on my phone, but my voice remained steady. Perfect. I'll text you when I land. And Patricia, don't mention anything to Andrew. I really want this to be a surprise. My lips are sealed. Dear. Richard says hello and that he can't wait to see you. We've missed you at Sunday dinner. After hanging up, I methodically began packing my suitcase. My movements precise and controlled. I plugged in my phone to charge and set an alarm for 4:30 a.m. Then I lay on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in my mind. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Instead, I planned. 12 hours later, I stood in the arrivals area of the airport, rolling my carry-on behind me as I texted Patricia. The flight had landed early, giving me time to freshen up in the airport restroom. I'd reapplied my signature red lipstick and brushed out my long brown hair. My green blouse Andrew always said it matched my ice was unwrinkled despite the flight. And I wore the pearl necklace Richard and Patricia had given me for my 33rd birthday. Just landed. Everything on schedule. I typed. Patricia's reply came almost immediately. Richard's appointment went faster than expected. We're ready whenever you are. So excited. I smiled slightly and hailed a taxi. Instead of giving the driver my home address, I provided the Whitman's address across town. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, I gazed out the window at the familiar city skyline. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of building a life with Andrew. 8 years of Sunday dinners with his parents. Holiday traditions. And future plans. And now, a red phone on my side of the bed. The taxi turned onto the tree-lined street where the Whitmans had lived for over 40 years. Their colonial-style home came into view. The place where Andrew had grown up. Where we'd celebrated our engagement. Where I'd found the family I'd always longed for. I paid the driver, adding a generous tip, and rolled my suitcase up the familiar walkway. Before I could even ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal Patricia's beaming face, her silver hair elegantly styled as always. Vivian! She exclaimed, pulling me into a tight embrace that smelled of gardenia perfume and home-baked cookies. Oh, it's so good to see you. Richard appeared behind his wife, tall and distinguished with Andrew's same blue eyes. There's our girl, he said warmly, waiting for his turn to hug me. How was the flight? Inside the Whitman home, everything was exactly as it always was, comfortable, welcoming, filled with family photos, including dozens of Andrew and me. Our wedding portrait held the place of honor on the mantel. As I sat at the kitchen counter accepting a cup of coffee from Patricia, I wondered how much longer these people would be in my life. The thought sent a wave of pain through me that was more acute than any anger toward Andrew. So, what's the plan? Richard asked, leaning against the counter. I'm assuming you have one, since you've orchestrated this whole surprise. I took a sip of my coffee before answering. I thought we could all go over together. I have a key. Of course. But I wanted you both there for the surprise. Andrew isn't expecting any of us. Patricia clapped her hands together. He's going to be so shocked. I haven't been able to keep a secret from that boy since he was 12. And we surprised him with that bike for Christmas. My smile didn't quite reach my eyes. Yes, I said. I'm counting on him being very surprised. An hour later, my heart hammered against my ribs as I inserted my key into the front door of the townhouse I shared with Andrew. Patricia and Richard stood behind me, their faces alight with the innocent joy of surprising their son. I had asked them to be quiet when we entered, suggesting we capture Andrew's reaction on video. I held my phone up as if preparing to record, though I hadn't actually pressed the button. Ready? I whispered, and the older couple nodded eagerly. The door swung open silently. Another detail I had always appreciated about our home. Andrew was fastidious about maintenance, ensuring no hinge ever squeaked, no floorboard ever creaked. How ironic that the very quietness he cultivated would now work against him. The entryway was empty, the house still, From somewhere upstairs came the muffled sound of running water. The shower, I guessed. My suspicions crystallized into certainty. But I maintained my composure. He must be upstairs. I whispered to Patricia and Richard. Let's surprise him. As we climbed the stairs, I noticed Patricia's confused glance at Andrew's keys and wallet on the entryway table. Next to them sat a woman's purse, sleek, expensive, unfamiliar. Patricia's eyes widened slightly, meeting my gaze with a question forming. But before any words could be spoken, we reached the top of the stairs, and the sound of the shower became clearer. So did another sound. Laughter. A woman's laughter, followed by Andrew's deeper chuckle. Richard froze, his hand tightening on the banister. The look he gave me contained a dawning horror, a silent plea that this wasn't what it seemed. I met his gaze steadily, letting him see the cold knowledge in my eyes. This was exactly what it seemed. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth, but I shook my head slightly, pressing a finger to my lips. Then I pointed toward the master bedroom, its door partially open. The older woman's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, her expression hardening into something I had never seen before. The three of us moved down the hallway in silence. I pushed the bedroom door fully open, revealing a room in disarray. The bed unmade, clothes strewn about. On my nightstand, two empty wine glasses. The shower shut off abruptly, and moments later, the bathroom door opened. Andrew emerged with a towel around his waist, his hair wet and slicked back. Behind him, wrapped in my plush bathrobe, the one Patricia had given me last Christmas, was a stunning blonde woman. She was younger than me, perhaps 28 or 29. Her hair piled messily atop her head, her makeup slightly smudged. What movie did you want? Andrew began, then stopped dead when he saw the three people standing in his bedroom. The blonde woman bumped into him from behind, not yet seeing what had caused him to freeze. What's wrong, babe? She asked, peering around his shoulder. When she spotted the audience, she let out a small gasp and clutched the bathrobe tighter. For several heartbeats, no one spoke. The only sound was the tick, tick, tick of the antique clock on the wall, a wedding gift from Richard and Patricia. Andrew recovered first, his face draining of color. Vivian, he breathed. You're supposed to be in Chicago. Clearly, I replied, my voice glacial. Mom, Dad. Andrew's voice rose in panic as he finally registered his parents' presence. What are you? Why are you? Andrew James Whitman. Patricia's voice cut through his stammering like a blade. What have you done? The blonde woman was edging back toward the bathroom, looking desperately for an escape. I should go, she mumbled. Julia, wait. Andrew reached for her arm, then seemed to realize this only made things worse. The name slipped out without thought, confirming what I already knew. This wasn't some anonymous encounter. He knew this woman well enough to have her in our home, using my things. Julia Thornton, I presume, I said coolly, causing the woman to freeze. Don't worry about the bathrobe. You can keep it. I won't be needing it anymore. Julia looked mortified, her eyes darting between Andrew and the door like a cornered animal. I didn't. He said you were separated. She stammered. He told me you were filing for divorce. Patricia made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Richard's face had turned to stone, his jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle jumping in his cheek. Did he? I tilted my head slightly. How interesting. We had a video call just last night. He didn't mention anything about a separation or a divorce. I turned my gaze to Andrew. In fact, we made plans for when I returned, which, according to you, would be this evening, not this morning. Andrew's face contorted, desperation and calculation warring in his expression. Viv, please, I can explain. Don't call me that. I cut him off. Only people who respect me get to use that name. Julia had managed to gather a handful of clothing from around the room, and was inching toward the bathroom again. I'm going to get dressed, she said to no one in particular. Andrew. Richard finally spoke, his voice deeper and more severe than I had ever heard it. Get some clothes on. Now. As Andrew retreated to the walk-in closet and Julia disappeared into the bathroom, an awkward silence fell over the bedroom. Patricia moved to my side, placing a hand on my arm. Sweetheart, I am so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. None of us did, I replied, patting her hand. Well, I had a hint. Last night during our call, I saw a red phone on my side of the bed. I gestured to the nightstand where, Sure enough, a bright red phone case was visible. Richard paced the length of the bedroom, running a hand through his silver hair in a gesture so reminiscent of his son that it made my heart twist. All those dinners, he muttered. All those times he said you were working late or visiting friends. He turned to me. How long have you suspected? Until last night? Not at all, I admitted. We've been married 8 years. I trusted him completely. The bathroom door opened and Julia emerged fully dressed. Her face scrubbed clean and her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger without makeup and somehow more vulnerable. I'm just going to go, she said quietly. Andrew emerged from the closet at the same moment, now wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. Julia, wait, he called after her as she headed for the door. Don't, she said firmly, not looking back. Just don't. Andrew, this is humiliating enough. She paused at the bedroom doorway, turning to me with genuine remorse in her eyes. I really didn't know. I'm so sorry. After Julia had gone, the sound of her quick footsteps descending the stairs and the front door closing behind her punctuated the tense silence. Andrew stood in the middle of the room, looking lost. For the first time, I really looked at him. The man I'd woken up beside for 8 years. The man I'd built dreams with. The man I'd believed in completely. He seemed smaller somehow, diminished by his actions. How long? I asked simply. Andrew swallowed hard. Vivian, please, can we talk about this alone? He glanced meaningfully at his parents. No, all three of us said in unison. Andrew's shoulders slumped. 6 months, he admitted. But it wasn't serious until recently. 6 months, Patricia repeated, her voice shaking with rage and grief. You've been betraying Vivian for half a year? You brought that woman into the home you share with your wife, Richard added, each word precise and cutting. You gave her access to Vivian's personal spaces, her belongings. I made a mistake, Andrew said desperately. A terrible mistake. But we can work through this. Couples do it all the time. I laughed. A short, harsh sound that contained no humor. Work through this? You've been living a double life for 6 months. Andrew, you've been lying to me every single day, looking me in the eye and telling me you love me while you were sleeping with another woman. I do love you, he insisted, taking a step toward me. I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. No, you don't get to say that to me anymore. Son, Richard's stern voice cut through the tension. I think it's best if you pack a bag and give Vivian some space. Andrew's expression hardened slightly. This is my house, too. Dad, you can't just kick me out. Actually, I interjected, my voice calm and clear. The deed is in my name. Or did you forget that detail when you insisted we put it that way for tax purposes? I crossed to the closet and pulled out a small suitcase, tossing it onto the bed. You have 30 minutes to pack whatever you need. After that, I'm changing the locks. You can't be serious. Andrew's voice rose in disbelief. Where am I supposed to go? That, I said coldly, is no longer my concern. He's certainly not coming to our house, Patricia added, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I didn't raise my son to behave this way. Andrew looked stricken, his gaze darting between his parents and his wife. The three people who had formed the center of his world were now a united front against him. Mom, Dad, please. Richard shook his head slowly. Your mother is right. Andrew, you made your choices. Now you face the consequences. As Andrew began haphazardly throwing clothes into the suitcase, muttering under his breath about overreactions and second chances, I stepped out of the bedroom. Patricia followed me, catching my arm in the hallway. Vivian, she said softly, whatever happens between you and Andrew, please know that Richard and I, her voice caught, we still consider you our daughter. That doesn't change. Tears threatened for the first time since I had seen the red phone on my side of the bed. I pulled Patricia into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar gardenia scent. Thank you, I whispered. You have no idea how much that means to me. That evening, after Andrew had departed with his hastily packed suitcase, and multiple failed attempts to convince me to reconsider, the house felt both emptier and somehow lighter. Patricia and Richard had stayed for hours, helping me strip the bed of its linens and remake it with fresh sheets. They'd ordered takeout when none of us felt like cooking, and we sat together in the living room, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. You don't have to stay, I had told them when darkness fell outside. I'll be okay. We know you will, Richard had replied, squeezing my hand. You're the strongest person in this family. You always have been. Family. The word had brought fresh tears to my eyes. Now, alone in the house that suddenly felt more like a museum of my marriage than a home, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, phone in hand. I had a dozen missed calls from Andrew, texts flooding in with desperate pleas and promises. I deleted them all without reading. Instead, I opened my email and composed a message to my boss, requesting 2 weeks of personal leave, effective immediately. I had vacation time accumulated. It was time to use it. With that task complete, I moved methodically through the house, gathering items that belonged exclusively to Andrew. His favorite coffee mug, the framed photo of his college baseball team, the vintage record player he'd inherited from his grandfather. I placed everything in a cardboard box I found in the garage, labeling it with his name. Tomorrow, I would drop it at his office. No need for another confrontation. My phone buzzed again. Andrew. This time, I blocked his number. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of white wine. Patricia had insisted on leaving for me. For medicinal purposes, the older woman had said with a wry smile. I poured myself a generous glass and carried it upstairs to the master bathroom, where I ran a steaming bath. I added lavender oil, a gift from Julia, ironically, who'd left it behind in her hasty departure. As I sank into the fragrant water, wine glass in hand, I felt the first real tremors of emotion breaking through my carefully maintained composure. A sob escaped my throat, followed by another, until I was crying openly, the tears mingling with the bathwater. I cried for the 8 years I'd invested in a man who could betray me so completely. I cried for the future we planned together, the children we talked about having, the retirement home in North Carolina we dreamed of buying. I cried for the woman I'd been just 24 hours ago, blissfully unaware that her life was built on lies. When the tears finally subsided and the bath water cooled, I emerged feeling oddly cleansed. I dried myself methodically, applied moisturizer to my face and body, and slipped into silk pajamas. In the bedroom, I pulled Andrew's pillow from the bed and tossed it into the corner. Tomorrow, I would buy new pillows, a new mattress, too. Perhaps. Sleep came surprisingly easily, deep and dreamless. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and for a blissful moment, I forgot everything that had happened. Then reality crashed back, and I lay still, absorbing the impact. My phone chimed with a text message. It was Patricia, checking in. Sweetheart, Richard and I are thinking of you. Call if you need anything at all. I smiled faintly and typed a response. I'm okay. Thank you for yesterday. Love you both. The reply came almost immediately. We love you too. Always. That simple exchange gave me the strength to get out of bed and face the day. I showered, dressed in comfortable jeans and a soft sweater, and made myself a proper breakfast, something I rarely had time for on workdays. As I ate, I made a list of practical steps: contact a divorce attorney, change the locks, close joint accounts, update my will and insurance policies. The tasks were mundane, almost clerical, but each one represented another thread being cut from the fabric of my marriage. By noon, I had accomplished the most pressing items on my list. The locksmith had come and gone, leaving me with shiny new keys that only I possessed. My appointment with a highly recommended divorce attorney was set for the following morning. The joint checking account was closed, with the balance transferred to a new account in my name only. I was just considering what to do for lunch when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Andrew standing on the porch. His expression was a carefully arranged mask of contrition. Behind him, parked at the curb, was his black BMW. Vivian, please, he called through the door. I know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway. We need to talk. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, considering my options. I could ignore him, but he might cause a scene. I could call the police, but that seemed excessive. Or I could face him, on my terms, in broad daylight. I chose the third option, opening the door just wide enough to see him properly. I crossed my arms over my chest. What do you want, Andrew? He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Can I come in? Please, just to talk. No, I said firmly. Say what you need to say from right there. Andrew ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I spent the night in my car, he said, gesturing toward the BMW. I couldn't get a hotel room because all my credit cards were declined. That's because they're joint accounts. And I froze them. I explained calmly. You should have access to your personal accounts and the cash in your wallet. I don't have a personal account, he admitted. And I don't carry much cash. For 8 years, I had handled our finances. Andrew had claimed to hate dealing with money matters. So I'd taken care of everything, paying bills, managing investments, balancing checkbooks. Now I realized how convenient that arrangement had been for him. That sounds like a you problem, I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. Andrew's face hardened slightly. Look, I know you're upset. Upset? I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. That's what you think I am? Upset is what happens when you forget our anniversary or work late on my birthday. This is something else entirely. I made a mistake, he insisted, his voice pleading. A terrible mistake. But everyone deserves a second chance. VIV? We've been together for 10 years. Married for 8. That has to count for something. It counted for everything. I replied quietly. That's why this hurts so much. Something like hope flickered in Andrew's eyes. Then let me make it up to you. Let me earn your trust back. We can go to counseling. Take some time apart if you need it. Whatever it takes. I studied him carefully. This man I'd once believed I knew better than anyone in the world. Even now, after everything, a small, foolish part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to imagine a path back to the life we'd shared. But another part, a stronger part that had been forged in the last 24 hours, recognized the manipulation behind his words, the selfishness that had always been there, hidden beneath his charm. You're not sorry you had an affair, I said slowly, the words crystallizing the truth in my own mind. You're sorry you got caught. If I hadn't changed my flight, if I hadn't seen that phone, you'd still be living your double life, lying to my face every day. That's not true, Andrew protested, though his voice lacked conviction. I was going to end it with Julia. I was just waiting for the right time. The right time? I raised an eyebrow. After 6 months, while you were still bringing her into our home, letting her wear my clothes, sleep in my bed? That's not someone looking for the right time to end an affair. That's someone who thought they'd never get caught. Andrew's expression shifted, frustration replacing contrition. What do you want from me? Vivian. I've apologized. I've admitted I was wrong. What more can I do? Nothing, I said simply. There's nothing you can do. Some things can't be fixed, Andrew. Some betrayals cut too deep. So, that's it. 10 years together, and you're just throwing it all away? I felt a surge of anger, hot and clarifying. I didn't throw anything away. You did. The moment you decided that your desires were more important than our vows, our trust, our future. My parents put you up to this, didn't they? Andrew's tone turned accusatory. They've always thought you were too good for me. Always taken your side in every argument. Leave your parents out of this, I warned. They're heartbroken enough without you dragging them into your mess. They're my parents. Andrew's voice rose. Not yours. You don't get to turn them against me. I felt a strange calm descend over me. The last vestiges of my grief were being burned away by the fire of his injustice. I didn't turn anyone against you, Andrew. You did that all by yourself. I began to close the door. Now, please leave before I call the police. This isn't over, he said, his voice low and tense. This is my house, too. You can't just lock me out and pretend I don't exist. Actually, I can, I replied. The deed is in my name, remember? And I've already spoken to my attorney. You'll be hearing from them soon. I closed the door firmly and turned the deadbolt, leaning against it as I listened to Andrew's retreating footsteps, followed by the slam of his car door and the engine roaring to life. Through the living room window, I watched his BMW pull away from the curb with unnecessary speed. Only when he was gone did I realize my hands were shaking. I moved to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, drinking it slowly as I processed the encounter. Andrew's reaction hadn't surprised me. He'd always lashed out when cornered. But the cold calculation behind his attempts to manipulate me had. Had he always been this way? And I'd simply failed to see it? Or had the years changed him into someone I no longer recognized? Either way, the clarity I felt now was undeniable. There was no going back. There was only forward, into a future I would need to reimagine completely. My phone rang, displaying Patricia's name on the screen. I answered immediately. Andrew just called Richard, Patricia said without preamble. Her voice was strained. He's claiming you've locked him out of the house and frozen all his accounts. He wants to stay with us. That's all true. I confirmed. Though I didn't freeze his personal accounts. Only our joint ones. It's not my fault he doesn't have his own bank account at 39. Patricia sighed heavily. Richard told him he's made his bed, and now he has to lie in it. Not in those exact words, but that was the gist. How did he take it? About as well as you'd expect. There was shouting. Then he hung up on his father. Patricia paused. Vivian, we want you to know that whatever happens between you and Andrew, our relationship with you doesn't change. You will always be our daughter. Tears pricked up my eyes. Even if I divorce your son? Especially if you divorce our son. Patricia said firmly. What he did was unforgivable. If I were in your shoes, I'd do exactly the same thing. The conversation with Patricia left me feeling strangely buoyant. I'd feared losing not just my husband, but his family as well, people who had given me the sense of belonging I'd craved all my life. Instead, they'd chosen me, affirming what I'd always suspected, that the bonds of love could be stronger than the bonds of blood. That afternoon, I began the process of reclaiming my space. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, creating a cozy reading nook where Andrew's oversized armchair used to dominate the room. I moved my clothes to the center of the closet, spreading them out luxuriously. I replaced Andrew's collection of historical biographies on the living room shelves with my own novels that had been relegated to boxes in the spare room. They were small changes, but significant ones. Each action felt like planting a flag, claiming this territory as solely my own. As evening fell, I ordered myself a pizza half mushroom, half olive, a combination Andrew had always vetoed, and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to browse travel websites, dreaming of places I might go alone. Spain had always called to me, with its warm people and rich history. Andrew had preferred tropical destinations with beaches and all-inclusive resorts. He liked easy vacations, predictable and comfortable. I craved culture, art, the thrill of the unknown. Perhaps it was time for me to see Barcelona, to walk the streets of Madrid, to taste authentic paella, and dance to flamenco music. The thought sent a thrill of possibility through me, a spark of excitement in the midst of my sorrow. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I was missing. I fell asleep on the couch, laptop still open to images of the Sagrada Familia, a half-eaten slice of pizza on the coffee table beside me. For the first time since seeing that red phone, I dreamed. Not of Andrew, or of Julia, or of the life that had crumbled around me, but of sun-drenched plazas, the sound of a Spanish guitar, and the intoxicating taste of freedom. 3 months passed in a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and the slow, painstaking process of rebuilding a life. Spring had given way to summer, and I sat in my attorney's office, pen poised over the final divorce agreement. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching on my emerald earrings. They were the only gift from Andrew I'd kept, not out of sentiment, but because they were rightfully mine, purchased with my bonus money despite his claims to the contrary. Once you sign these, Meredith Barnes, my attorney, explained, the documents will be filed with the court. Given the prenuptial agreement and the circumstances of the dissolution, I don't anticipate any issues. You should be legally divorced within 30 days. I nodded, scanning the pages one last time. The terms were fair, perhaps even generous. Considering Andrew's infidelity, he would keep his car and personal belongings, his retirement account, and a cash settlement that I had insisted on including. I would retain the house, my own retirement funds, and the majority of our shared assets. Andrew had fought the terms initially, hiring a shark of a lawyer who tried to claim that his client deserved half of everything, despite the prenup. But when Meredith had calmly pointed out that the existence of the affair violated a morality clause in our agreement, Andrew had backed down quickly. The threat of having his infidelity detailed in a public court filing was more than he could bear. You're sure about the settlement amount? Meredith asked. Not for the first time. Legally, you don't owe him anything. I'm sure. I replied. It's not about what he deserves. It's about who I am. I don't want to leave him with nothing. I just want to leave him with a steady hand. I signed my name on the indicated lines, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief as I formed each letter. When I finished, I set down the pen and took a deep breath. It was done. A chapter of my life, the largest one so far, was officially over. Congratulations, Meredith said, gathering the documents. You're almost officially single again. The word single struck me with unexpected force. I hadn't been truly single since my mid-20s. Having met Andrew shortly after graduate school. Now, at 35, I was starting over. Not just romantically, but in every aspect of my life. The prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. Thank you for everything, Meredith, I said, standing and extending my hand. You've made this process as painless as possible. The attorney shook my hand warmly. That's my job. Though I have to say, you've been one of my most reasonable clients. Most people in your position would have wanted blood. I just wanted it over with, I admitted. The longer we dragged it out, the longer I'd be tied to him. Outside the attorney's office, I paused on the sidewalk, tilting my face up to the warm July sun. I'd taken the entire day off work, anticipating that the signing would leave me emotionally drained. Instead, I felt oddly energized, as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. On impulse, I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. It's done, I said when Andrew's mother answered. I just signed the papers. Oh, sweetheart. Patricia's voice was warm with understanding. How are you feeling? Lighter, I replied honestly. Like I can finally start looking forward instead of back. That's wonderful to hear. Richard and I were just about to have lunch in the garden. Would you like to join us? I made that cucumber soup you love. I smiled. In the months since discovering Andrew's betrayal, my relationship with his parents had only strengthened. They'd stood by me through every step of the divorce, offering support without judgment or interference. Richard had even accompanied me to the bank when I'd needed to refinance the mortgage, in my name alone. His steady presence a comfort during the stressful process. They had become my staunchest allies, my most trusted confidants. I'd love that, I said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive to the Whitmans' home was familiar and soothing. I rolled down the windows, letting the summer breeze tussle my hair as I navigated the tree-lined streets. When I arrived, Patricia was waiting on the front porch, arms open for a hug. You look wonderful, the older woman said, holding me at arm's length to steady my face. There's a glow about you today. Freedom looks good on me, I replied with a small smile. In the backyard, Richard was setting the patio table with Patricia's best summer china, the blue and white pattern that only came out for special occasions. When he saw me, his face lit up a genuine pleasure. There she is, he said, pulling me into a bear hug that felt safe and solid. Our brave girl. Lunch was a leisurely affair. The conversation flowed easily between serious topics and light-hearted banter. Richard shared stories from his morning golf game. Patricia discussed her latest book club selection. I filled them in on my promotion at work, a silver lining to the past few months, as I channeled my emotional energy into my career with impressive results. We spoke of Andrew only once. Have you heard from him? Patricia asked eventually. The question gentle but direct. I shook my head. Not since the mediation session last month. His lawyer communicates with mine. But that's it. I hesitated before adding. I heard through a colleague that he's taken a job in Seattle. Apparently. He starts next month. Richard and Patricia exchanged a glance. He mentioned something about a job opportunity when he called last week. Richard admitted. But he was vague about the details. You still talk to him, I observed. It wasn't a question. He's our son, Patricia said simply. Despite everything, that hasn't changed. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. But you're our daughter, too. By choice rather than by blood. And in some ways, that makes the bond just as strong, if not stronger. Tears threatened, but I blinked them away. The lump in my throat was one of pure gratitude. Thank you, I said softly, for choosing me. After lunch, as Patricia cleared the dishes despite my offers to help, Richard led me to a quiet corner of the garden, where a stone bench sat beneath a flowering arbor. The air was sweet with the scent of roses. I have something for you, he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. It's not much, but Patricia and I thought you might be able to use it. Curious, I opened the envelope to find a travel voucher for a major airline. What's this? A little bird told us you've been dreaming of Spain, Richard said with a twinkle in his eye. Patricia found your browser history when she borrowed your laptop to look up that recipe last month. I laughed. A genuine, happy sound. Caught red-handed. I guess. We want you to go, Richard continued, his expression suddenly serious. To Spain. Or anywhere else your heart desires. You've spent too many years compromising on your dreams, Vivian. It's time to start living them. For yourself. The generosity of the gift. Not just the monetary value but the sentiment behind it. left me momentarily speechless. I looked down at the voucher, then back up at the man who had been more of a father to me than my own had ever been. I don't know what to say. I finally managed. Say you'll send us postcards. Richard replied with a gentle smile, and that you'll come back to us when you're ready. That evening, after a tearful goodbye with promises to visit again soon, I returned home to find a small package on my doorstep. The return address was from a bookstore in Seattle, but I recognized Andrew's handwriting immediately. My first instinct was to throw it away, to refuse any further attempts at communication. But a deeper, quieter curiosity won out, and I carried it inside. At my kitchen counter, I carefully opened the package. Inside was a leather-bound travel journal, simple and elegant, with my initials, V.W., embossed in gold on the cover. Tucked inside the first page was a brief note in Andrew's familiar scroll. Vivian, I heard about your trip to Spain. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. This doesn't make up for anything. I know that. But I wanted you to have it. Be happy. Andrew. I ran my fingers over the soft leather, conflicting emotions washing over me. The journal was exactly the sort of thing I would have loved in our married life. Thoughtful, practical, personal. He remembered how I always talked about keeping a proper journal on our travels, but never found the right one. Coming now, after everything, it felt like a bittersweet reminder of the man I thought he was versus the one he turned out to be. Was this a genuine gesture of goodwill, or another calculated attempt to ease his own conscience? I wasn't sure, but it no longer mattered. His motivations were his own. My journey was mine. I placed the journal on my bookshelf without making a decision about whether to use it. That could wait. For now, I had plans to make, a trip to book, a new life to envision. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into preparations for my Spanish adventure. It became a joyful obsession, a welcome distraction from the lingering legal formalities of the divorce. I took online lessons to brush up on my college Spanish, practicing phrases in the car on my way to work. I researched off-the-beaten-path destinations, bookmarking articles about hidden tapas bars in Seville and coastal hiking trails in Basque Country. And I bought a new wardrobe that reflected the woman I was becoming rather than the woman I had been. Gone were the conservative suits and sensible pumps of my married life. In their place were flowing dresses in bold colors, comfortable linen trousers, stylish sandals made for walking on cobblestone streets, and bright accessories that expressed a rediscovered sense of self. The woman who was going to Spain was not the same woman who had cried in the bathtub 3 months ago. This woman was braver, more adventurous, and entirely her own. The night before my departure, I hosted a small dinner party, my first since the separation. Patricia and Richard came, of course, along with a few close colleagues who had supported me through the worst of the divorce. The house, which had once felt like a shrine to my failed marriage, had been transformed. I had painted the dining room a warm terracotta, rearranged the living room furniture to feel more open and inviting, and hung artwork on the walls that spoke to my personal taste, rather than the compromised aesthetic Andrew and I had settled on. It finally felt like my home. To new beginnings. Richard toasted, raising his glass of wine as we sat around my dining table. His blue eyes, so like Andrew's but filled with a kindness his son lacked, met mine across the table. And to our brave, beautiful Vivian, Patricia added, her voice thick with emotion, who reminds us all that endings can also be doorways. The others echoed the sentiment, and I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it almost brought me to tears. These people, this chosen family, had been my anchor in the storm. Whatever lay ahead in Spain adventure, reflection, perhaps even romance, I knew I would return to a home filled with love and support. I was not adrift. I was simply charting a new course. Later, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, I stood in my bedroom, packing the last few items into my new suitcase. It was a vibrant shade of turquoise, a stark contrast to the sensible black luggage Andrew and I had always shared. On impulse, I reached for the leather journal he had sent, turning it over in my hands. The gold of my initials caught the light. For a moment, I considered leaving it behind, a final severing of ties. But then a different thought occurred to me. The journal was a blank book. Its story hadn't been written yet. It didn't belong to Andrew, or to our past. It belonged to whoever wrote in its pages. And that was going to be me. With a newfound sense of resolve, I placed it in my suitcase, not as a memento of him, but as a blank page waiting to be filled with my own story, one that had nothing to do with our shared past. As I zipped the suitcase closed, My phone chimed with a text from Patricia. Sleep well. Sweetheart. Tomorrow. You spread your wings. I smiled and texted back a heart emoji, then set my alarm for the early morning flight. As I drifted off to sleep, my dreams were filled not with regrets or what-ifs, but with the scent of orange blossoms, the sound of castanets, and the endless possibilities that awaited me across the ocean. In Spain. Yes. But more importantly, in the undiscovered country of my own future. The 30-day waiting period for the divorce finalization passed. While I was walking the ancient streets of Barcelona, sampling tapas at local bars and photographing the sunset over Gaudi's architectural masterpieces, I received the final decree via email. A sterile PDF document that felt strangely anticlimactic. I read it on my tablet while sitting at a sidewalk cafe in the Gothic Quarter. Around me, life pulsed with energy. Street musicians played flamenco guitar. Tourists and locals mingled in the late afternoon sun. The scent of espresso and fresh-baked bread filled the air. I closed the email and set down my tablet, taking a sip of sangria as I observed the scene around me. A man at a nearby table, handsome with dark, kind eyes, caught my gaze and smiled. A genuine, appreciative smile with no agenda behind it. I smiled back, feeling a faint flutter of possibility, then returned to my people watching without expectation. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt completely present in my own life, neither dwelling on the past nor anxiously anticipating the future. I was not Andrew Whitman's wife, nor was I simply a woman recovering from a broken heart. I was Vivian. Just Vivian. And that felt more than enough. I was exactly where I needed to be, becoming exactly who I was meant to be. One moment at a time. The world felt vast and full of promise. The life I had known was over. But a new one, entirely of my own making, was just beginning. My journey continued south, to the sun-baked landscapes of Andalusia. In Seville, I learned to dance a rudimentary flamenco, my laughter echoing in the small studio as I stumbled through the passionate, intricate steps. My instructor, an older woman with eyes that held centuries of stories, told me, "The dance is not in the feet, Mija. It is in the soul. You must feel the pain, the joy, and let it move you." Her words resonated far beyond the dance floor. In Granada, I wandered through the breathtaking halls of the Alhambra, losing myself for hours in the intricate tile work and serene courtyards. I thought of Andrew. Briefly. He would have been bored, impatient to get back to a resort pool. I realized with a startling clarity that I had spent years shrinking my own interests to fit into the small container of our shared life. I had forgotten how much I loved history, how it moved me, how exploring a new city on foot made me feel alive. I was rediscovering parts of myself I hadn't even known were lost. One evening, sitting on a hillside overlooking the city as the sky turned a fiery orange, I finally opened the leather journal Andrew had given me. The first page was still blank. Pristine. I thought about what to write. I could document the pain, the betrayal, the anger. I could write a letter to him I would never send. But that felt like giving the past power over my present. Instead, I took a deep breath of the fragrant air and wrote in clear, steady script. Today, I begin again. And with those 4 words, the journal was no longer his gift. It was my manifesto. The rest of my trip was a pilgrimage of self-discovery. I ate what I wanted, slept when I was tired, and woke when I was rested. I followed my own whims, spending an entire day in a small art museum in Madrid, getting wonderfully lost in the winding streets of Cordoba, and sitting by the sea in Malaga, simply watching the waves. I spoke with strangers, practiced my clumsy Spanish, and learned to rely entirely on myself. I found that I was excellent company. I filled the journal with sketches of archways, snippets of conversations, descriptions of meals, and reflections on my own changing heart. It was a record not of a vacation, but of a transformation. My last night in Spain was spent in a small, family-run hotel in a tiny white village perched on a cliffside. After a simple dinner of fresh fish and local wine, I sat on my small balcony, the lights of the distant coastline twinkling below. I had been gone for nearly a month. Tomorrow, I would fly home. A year ago, the thought of returning to that house alone would have filled me with dread. Now, it felt different. I was returning not to an empty house, but to my house, to my life, to Patricia and Richard, my true family. The sadness of my divorce had not vanished, but it no longer defined me. It was simply a part of my story, a painful chapter that had led to a more interesting and authentic book. I thought about the future. For so long, My vision of it had been inextricably linked with Andrew. Children, promotions, retirement, it was all a shared dream. Now, the canvas was blank. I could paint anything I wanted on it. The idea was no longer terrifying. It was thrilling. I had a career I loved, a home that was my sanctuary, and a support system that was unwavering. I had myself, and for the first time, I felt that was enough. The flight home was long, but I didn't mind. I read a novel, watched a movie, and dozed, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. When the plane finally descended through the clouds, revealing the familiar grid of Chicago streets below, my heart didn't ache with memories of the past. Instead, it felt full of anticipation for the future. As I walked through the arrivals gate at O'Hare, I saw them, Patricia and Richard, standing near the baggage claim, holding a small, hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome home, Vivian." Patricia was beaming, and Richard had the same warm, proud smile he'd worn at my college graduation. I dropped my bags and ran to them, throwing my arms around them both in a group hug. Patricia smelled of gardenias, Richard of his familiar clean, woodsy cologne. It was the scent of home. "We couldn't let you take a taxi," Patricia said, her eyes shining. "A proper welcome was in order," Richard added, taking my suitcase from me. "Besides, we were too excited to see you." Driving back to my house, I told them all about my trip, showing them pictures on my phone of sunlit plazas and ancient cathedrals. They listened with genuine interest, asking questions and sharing in my joy. There was no awkwardness, no mention of Andrew. It was just family, catching up after a long time apart. When we pulled into my driveway, I saw that the flower boxes under the front windows, which had been empty when I left, were now overflowing with vibrant red geraniums. "Oh," I breathed. "They're beautiful. We thought the place could use a little extra color," Patricia said with a shrug. A welcome home present. That night, after my chosen parents had left with promises of Sunday dinner, I unpacked my bags. I placed a leather journal, now filled with my own words and experiences, on my nightstand. I hung a small painting I bought from a street artist in Madrid on my living room wall. The house felt even more like mine now, infused with the spirit of my journey. I fell asleep in my own bed, the scent of fresh linens and the faint perfume of geraniums drifting through the open window. My life was not the one I had planned. It was messy and complicated and had been built from the wreckage of a profound betrayal. But as I drifted off to sleep, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it was also beautiful. And it was just beginning. 1 year after signing the divorce papers, I stood in the sunny kitchen of my remodeled townhouse, arranging strawberries on a homemade cake, the renovations I dreamed about for years, but Andrew had always deemed too expensive or unnecessary, had finally been completed. Walls had been knocked down to create an open-concept living space. The dark, heavy kitchen cabinets were replaced with light blue ones, and the windows had been enlarged to let in more natural light. The house, like its owner, had transformed into something brighter, more authentic, and more aligned with its true nature. "Are the strawberries straight enough?" I asked, glancing over my shoulder at Patricia, who was arranging a bouquet of sunflowers in a vase on the kitchen island. "They're perfect," Patricia assured me, her smile warm. "Charlotte is going to love it." At the mention of the name, my heart swelled with a love so fierce it almost took my breath away. 6 months ago, after returning from Spain and settling back into my life with a newfound sense of purpose, I had made the decision that would change everything. The adoption process had been challenging mountains of paperwork, invasive home studies, anxious interviews, and what felt like an eternity of waiting. But last week, it had finally happened. 5-year-old Charlotte Rose Whitman had come home. Now, as I put the finishing touches on the cake for Charlotte's official welcome party, I could hear the sound of giggles from the backyard. Richard was helping the little girl test out her new swing set. The joyful sound floated through the open windows, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. "I still can't believe she's really here," I said softly, my voice catching. "That she's really mine." Patricia set down the flowers and moved to my side, placing a comforting arm around my shoulders. "Believe it, sweetheart. You're a mother now, and that beautiful child adores you already." It was true. Despite the newness of their relationship, Charlotte had bonded with me almost immediately. The social workers had marveled at how quickly the typically reserved child had opened up, asking within days if she could call me mommy. The memory of that moment, Charlotte's hesitant voice, her big brown eyes watching my face for a reaction, still brought tears to my eyes. Of course. I had told her. Of course. I couldn't have done this without you and Richard. I said, leaning my head against Patricia's shoulder. Your support through everything. The divorce. Spain. The adoption. You've been there every step of the way. And we always will be. Patricia promised. That's what family does. The doorbell rang, interrupting our moment. That'll be Maggie from work, I said, wiping my hands on a kitchen towel. She's bringing her kids for Charlotte to meet. As the afternoon progressed, the house and yard filled with people, colleagues who had become dear friends, neighbors who had watched my quiet transformation over the past year, even my own parents, who had flown in from Arizona. They were making an effort to be part of their daughter's new life in a way they never had before. It was a tentative step, but it was a start. Charlotte, initially shy with so many strangers, gradually warmed up, especially to the other children who eagerly showed her how to play tag in the backyard. I moved through the gathering, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but my eyes constantly sought out Charlotte, a maternal instinct I was still getting used to, checking to make sure the child wasn't overwhelmed. During a quiet moment, I found myself standing next to Richard by the new French doors, watching as Patricia knelt in the grass, helping Charlotte make a daisy chain. She's a natural grandmother, I observed with a smile. Richard nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. She's been practicing for years on our neighbor's kids. But this is different. Charlotte is family. The simple, profound statement touched me deeply. I've been meaning to ask you both, I said hesitantly, turning to him. I know it might seem strange, given everything with Andrew, but would you be willing to be Charlotte's official grandparents? I want her to know you as Grandma and Grandpa, not just as Patricia and Richard. Richard's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. He cleared his throat, his voice rough with emotion when he spoke. We would be honored. Vivian. More than you know. Later, after the cake had been eaten and the presents opened, after the last of the guests had departed and Charlotte had been tucked into her new bed, with its canopy of twinkling fairy lights, I sat on the patio with Patricia and Richard. The summer evening was perfectorm with a gentle breeze, the garden fragrant with the jasmine and roses I had planted in the spring. I have something for Charlotte, Patricia said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small, gift-wrapped box. But I wanted to check with you first. Curious, I unwrapped the package to find a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. It was an antique, beautifully engraved with tiny flowers. When I opened it, I found a tiny, perfectly cut photograph of Patricia and Richard on one side. The other side was empty. I thought maybe a picture of you could go on the other side, Patricia explained softly, so she can always keep her family close to her heart. It's beautiful, I whispered, closing the locket carefully. The weight of it felt significant in my palm. She'll treasure it. Thank you. There's something else, Richard said, exchanging a meaningful glance with his wife. We've been thinking about this for a while now, and with Charlotte's arrival, it seems like the perfect time. He pulled a thick manila envelope from the briefcase at his feet and handed it to me. We've updated our will. I opened the envelope with questioning eyes, pulling out the legal document inside. My breath caught as I scanned the formal language and realized what I was reading. My gaze jumped from the page to their faces. You're naming me as your heir? I asked incredulously. But what about Andrew? Andrew will be provided for, Patricia assured me. He will never want for anything. But the house, the majority of our assets, we want them to go to you and Charlotte. But I'm not your daughter, I protested weakly. Not by blood. Blood is overrated, Richard said firmly, his eyes meeting mine with unwavering conviction. You became our daughter the day you walked into our lives. Vivian. Nothing that divorce, not distance, not even biology changes that fact. You are our family, and Charlotte is our granddaughter. This is how it should be. Tears spilled down my cheeks, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude and love. I don't know what to say. Say you'll bring Charlotte to Sunday dinner every week, Patricia suggested with a gentle smile. Say you'll let us spoil her rotten and teach her all the things grandparents are supposed to teach. Of course, I agreed, wiping at my tears with the back of my hand. She needs you both in her life. I need you both. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. We talked about Charlotte's upcoming enrollment in kindergarten, the family vacation Patricia and Richard were already planning for all four of us at Christmas, and the garden redesign I was considering for the fall. As we talked, I felt a sense of rightness, of belonging that transcended any conventional definition of family. The neat boxes society used wife, son, daughter-in-law had all been broken. And in their place, something more resilient and far more beautiful had grown. Later that night, after Patricia and Richard had gone home with promises to return the next day for a quieter visit with their new granddaughter, I checked on Charlotte one last time. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, her dark curls spread across the pillow, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Richard had brought her. I stood in the doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, marveling at how completely this child had captured my heart in such a short time. Adoption had always been part of my plan, even during my marriage. While Andrew had consistently postponed the discussion, citing financial concerns or career timing, I had held on to the dream. Now, standing in the soft glow of Charlotte's nightlight, I understood that the universe had known exactly what it was doing when it placed a red phone on my side of the bed 2 years ago. The thought of Andrew no longer brought pain or anger. In the months following our divorce, I had worked through those emotions with the help of therapy, supportive friends, and my own determination to heal. The last I'd heard, through Patricia's occasional, brief updates, he had settled in Seattle, started his own consulting firm, and was dating someone new. I wished him well, genuinely and without reservation. Our paths had diverged, as they were always meant to. 6 weeks after Charlotte's welcome party, on a crisp September morning, I loaded a picnic basket, a blanket, and an excited 5-year-old into my car. We were meeting Patricia and Richard at the Botanical Gardens, Charlotte's first official outing with her new grandparents, since the adoption had been finalized completely. "Mommy, will there be ducks?" Charlotte asked from her car seat, bouncing with anticipation. "Yes, sweetheart," I answered, adjusting the rearview mirror to catch a glimpse of her delighted face. "And Grandma Patricia packed bread for us to feed them." "A grandma," Charlotte repeated, testing the word with a smile. "I never had a grandma before." "Well, now you have the best grandma in the whole world," I assured her. "And the best grandpa, too." At the gardens, Patricia and Richard were waiting at the entrance, their faces lighting up at the sight of Charlotte running toward them. Arms outstretched, Richard swept her up in a bear hug, spinning her around until she squealed with laughter. Patricia embraced me, the two of us watching with matching smiles as Charlotte began chattering excitedly to Richard about the ducks they were going to feed. "She's wearing the locket," Patricia observed, her voice soft, noticing the silver chain around Charlotte's neck. "She hasn't taken it off since you gave it to her," I replied. "She likes to open it before bed and say good night to all of us." We spent the day wandering through the gardens, Charlotte's endless energy and curiosity leading us from one discovery to another. A butterfly landing on a flower, a hidden statue among the trees, a patch of clover where she insisted on searching for one with her leaves. By mid-afternoon, we settled on our blanket near the duck pond, unpacking the picnic Patricia had prepared. As we ate sandwiches and shared stories, I found myself watching Charlotte with her grandparents. The easy affection, the inside jokes already developing, the way Patricia gently tucked a strand of hair behind Charlotte's ear with the same tenderness she'd always shown me. In those moments, biology seemed utterly irrelevant. This was family in its truest form, chosen, nurtured, cherished. When the day began to wane and Charlotte's energy finally showed signs of flagging, we packed up our belongings and headed for the exit. At the parking lot, Charlotte insisted on going home with her grandparents for a little while longer. "Please, Mommy," she begged, her brown eyes wide and persuasive. "Grandpa promised to show me how to play chess." I exchanged glances with Patricia and Richard. "If it's not too much trouble." "Trouble?" Richard scoffed. "Having our granddaughter over is never trouble. I'll bring her home before dinner," Patricia promised. With Charlotte happily settled in her grandparents' car, I found myself with an unexpected afternoon of solitude. I drove to my favorite bookstore, browsing leisurely through the travel section. My fingers traced the spines of guides to Italy, Greece, France, future adventures I now planned to share with Charlotte when the time was right. At 7 o'clock, I pulled into the familiar driveway of the Whitman home, the house glowing warmly in the early evening light. Before I could even ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal Charlotte, her face alight with excitement. "Mommy, guess what? I learned to play chess, and almost beat Grandpa, and Grandma let me help make cookies. And look at what we found in their attic." She held up a small wooden music box, ornately carved with flowers and birds. "Grandma says it's very old and special, and now it's mine to keep." I looked questioningly at Patricia, who appeared behind Charlotte in the doorway. It was my grandmother's. Patricia explained. I've been saving it for the right person. Charlotte seems to be that person. The unspoken words hung in the air that she had once intended the heirloom for a biological grandchild, or perhaps for me to one day pass down. Instead, life had taken unexpected turns, creating connections that transcended conventional relationships. Charlotte carefully opened the music box, and the delicate notes of Claire de Lune filled the entryway. Isn't it pretty? Mommy, it's beautiful. I agreed, my voice thick with emotion. I met Patricia's eyes over Charlotte's head. Thank you. Family treasures should stay in the family, Patricia said simply. Driving home with Charlotte, chattering happily in the back seat about her adventures, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the same one who had seen a red phone on her side of the bed so long ago. This woman was stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and despite her pain, but because of it. Mommy, Charlotte's voice interrupted my thoughts. Are you happy? The question, so simple yet so profound, made me smile. Yes, sweetheart, I answered truthfully. I'm very, very happy. Me too, Charlotte declared, hugging her music box close to her chest. I love our family. Our family. The words echoed in my heart as I drove toward home. Not the home I had once shared with Andrew, but the home I had created for myself and Charlotte, filled with light and possibility and a love that knew no boundaries. In the end, I reflected, the red phone that had shattered my world had also set me free. Free to discover my own strength, to redefine family on my own terms, to build a life that honored my authentic self. The betrayal that had once seemed like an ending had been merely a doorway, painful to walk through, certainly, but leading to wide open spaces where joy was waiting to be found. The sun was setting as we turned onto our street, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day would dawn tomorrow, bringing its own challenges and triumphs. But I was ready for whatever came. I had everything I needed, myself, my daughter, my chosen family, and the wisdom that comes only from walking through fire and emerging stronger on the other side. We're home, I announced as we pulled into the driveway. Home, Charlotte repeated, the word filled with contentment and belonging. Yes, I thought, my heart full to bursting as I helped her unbuckle her seatbelt. We were home, not to a place, but to the lives we were meant to live, to the love we were meant to share, to the family we had created together. And it was more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined.